We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And we're back with longtime host of LN Radio, Tim Donner, and Liberty Nation's Graham J. Noble. Earlier, we discussed the foibles and follies belaboring Democrats as Election Day approaches. But I want to shift to crystal ball gazing now, chaps, and see if we can nail down some predictions. So first, how about Graham? I keep rereading an article you wrote on libertynation.com about how Georgia might once again be the focal point, and how if the Senate races are close, we might not know who has ultimate control until December. Can you give us a brief rundown of that particular scenario, please?
Well, yes. And, you know, the thing about Georgia is basically the main target for Democrats at the moment. I mean, they would dearly love to get rid of the Electoral College altogether. But in terms of a strategy to capture the Electoral College and give themselves an advantage possibly for, you know, who knows, decades, Georgia is a key state. You know, North Carolina, by virtue of the number of electoral votes at stake here, North Carolina, Georgia, and Texas are all major Democrat targets. And that's why they've been kind of chomping away, trying to get control of the Peach State for a while now, because, you know, they turned North Carolina into a purple state, although, you know, this election cycle, that may change again. You know, it may go back to a red state, at least temporarily. But basically, they got their foot in the door in North Carolina. And so now the next, and Texas is still a little beyond their capability. So Georgia has been a focal point. That's why Stacey Abrams is so desperate to become governor of Georgia. And of course, the last time around, you know, we had those two runoff elections, and the Democrats took them both. And I think that was kind of a shock to the system for a lot of Republicans. And this time around, Democrats are desperate not to lose Raphael Warnock's seat. And that's a close one. And, you know, that could go to a runoff because Georgia's one of only two states where in order to win the election outright, one candidate has to get 50% of the vote plus one. You know, so they have to pass that 50% threshold in order to avoid a runoff. That race, you know, who knows, that may, okay, we may be surprised and Herschel Walker may walk away with it, but I don't think so. I think it's entirely possible that race is going to head to a runoff. Difficult. I don't like to predict the outcome of this one. I honestly believe that it's anybody's race, literally. I mean, I think Walker's looking good, but, you know, it wouldn't shock me if Raphael Warnock somehow managed to pull that one out.
So, Tim, let's continue with this theme, please. So you mentioned just before the break about that there's 4 states that the Senate race really hangs on. What's your analysis of those races?
Well, I think until recently, everybody thought Warnock was going to keep that seat for the Democrats, and that at best Walker might be able to force a runoff. Now I think you're looking at the possibility that Walker can win 50% plus and avoid a runoff. But even if he doesn't, I don't think that the Senate is going to pivot on the result in Georgia because all the momentum is heading towards the Republicans. Now, this midterm cycle, Mark, reminds me of a presidential cycle, 1980. And Jimmy Carter was wildly unpopular. And
I can't think why.
He seemed weak and not up to the job. He had proven himself not really equal to the task of the presidency. However, going to the final week of the campaign, he was virtually tied with Ronald Reagan in all the public opinion polls. And then in the last week, the dam absolutely burst. And Reagan won 45 states against a sitting president. I think we could be seeing the same thing in this cycle with the dam bursting loose. You see an incredible wave, an incredible red tide rising across the country as people become aware and start to think about, wait a minute, do I really want these same people that encouraged the rioters during 2020 who've imposed a cancel culture, who tried to spend trillions that we don't have, who've caused inflation, who now have to raise interest rates and cause a recession to fix inflation. No, I think people are looking at their lives just like they did in 1980 and saying, are they better off than they were 2 years ago? And the answer is a resounding no.
Right. I'm going to have to nail you guys down on some numbers here. Graham, you first. Senate, what's your final prediction?
I believe that the Republicans will come out of this with a net gain of either 2 or 3 seats, so they'll be at 52 or maybe 53 seats.
Bold prediction. Tim, you for the Senate?
Well, I might just say that when we talked about this previously during the fall, Mark, I said that the Senate was on a knife's edge. It's not anymore. I'll take Graham's prediction one step further. I say the Republicans win either 3 or 4 Senate seats and easily gain control of the upper chamber.
Yeah, okay. Right. I think my prediction here, I'm going to go with a very conservative 52 for Republicans. But I think I suspect that won't be resolved until December with the Georgia runoff. And gentlemen, thank you both for your time. Let's see how these predictions play out. And listeners, keep voting.
Always a pleasure, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
You're listening to Liberty Nation Radio, heard across the Radio America network from our flagship station in the nation's capital, WWRC in Washington, D.C. Later in the show, we discuss Black and Hispanic voter priorities and affirmative action. Don't go anywhere. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides. Entertaining, informative, and just plain fun. Watch Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5, produced by conservatives for conservatives. C5's The Left Free Zone, hosted by Liberty Nation's Lisa K. Donner, joined by a raucous, irreverent panel of authors, deconstructing leftist narratives, debating the hot topics, and remembering to laugh. Join the official conservative safe
You only
space.
did that to piss Jeff off.
Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5.